Hey guys, I'm Pastor Darvin, and welcome to our online devotions every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We started in our last devotion in on the very short book of Second John. And if you remember there, what we said is it's just the whole book is one short chapter, okay? And it can be divided into two sections: a theological belief and then a very practical command John gives the church based on that belief. Okay? And that belief was this: I ask that we love one another, and this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands. So, when, in our passage for today, he starts like this, he says, I say this, he's talking about, I say this about love, that we're supposed to love others, and that we're supposed to define love through the lens of obedience to God, God's truth, God's commands. He gets to define it, right? He says that so that now he can make this very practical command of the church he's writing to, and really of us. It's something for us all to think of. So he says this: I say this because many deceivers who do not acknowledge Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh have gone out into the world. So what is going on here? Okay, here's what's going on. There was a movement that was around before Jesus was born called Gnosticism. And as the early church grew for the first few centuries, Gnosticism tried to work its way into the church to steal brand new converts to Christianity over to its thought. Now, there wasn't like one church of Gnosticism or something like that. There were lots of different sects and lots of different ideas. But what held them together was the thought that they had in their teacher, their each individual within a certain sect or group of them had a special divine knowledge. That Jesus didn't have, the knowledge that needed to be added to, that scripture, the Bible, it didn't really have everything, that really there was some secret knowledge. If you could just tap into that, you could really understand God. And wouldn't you know it, I am the only one who has it. That was kind of the idea of Gnosticism. Now, Gnosticism, one of their beliefs often revolved around the idea that the physical world was dark, that our bodies and the dirt and the rock, it's evil. It's inherently, everything physical is evil, and the only good is the immaterial spiritual side of us. So they created a view that became known as Docetism, because if you think the physical world is evil, but you're trying to convince people who are Christians to come over to your side, well, then what do? You have to tell them that Jesus' body wasn't real, right? So they were going around telling people that Jesus didn't really come in the flesh. His body, his physical existence, it was just an illusion, right? It's called Docetism from the Gnostics. And so this is going on. I mean, you can imagine this. John is writing up something like 6 decades after Jesus' death and resurrection. And so, of course, people are trying to deceive Christians by this point. And this is one of the ways. Those who do not acknowledge Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh. Okay? So that's what he's getting at. He wants you to be aware that there are going to be deceivers in the world, just like these Gnostics. Then he says, any such person is the deceiver and the Antichrist. Now, Antichrist. I know when we say that word, we read that word in Scripture, there's so much cultural baggage with that word now. I mean, there's like horror movies about it. It's right that we almost lose the biblical definition. So don't overthink the word Antichrist here in John. When you read Antichrist, read just that. Anti-Christ. Against Christ. Right? Someone who is denying Christ, who is trying to take advantage of the church and deceive them, someone who is against Christ. So if you teach something that isn't the truth of Jesus, like saying that he didn't really come in the flesh, he wasn't both God and man, flesh and spirit. If you teach something like that, well, then you're a deceiver. You're the Antichrist. You're not telling the truth. That's John's point. Then he says this. Verse 8, watch out that you do not lose what we have worked for. What does he mean that we have worked for? Well, by we here, I think he means him and the other people working on behalf of the gospel. Maybe even the other disciples, right? Not that they're around at any point, but at this point in history, because John is the last living disciple at the point of the writing of this letter. But what his point is the disciples like me and everyone else who works on behalf of the gospel of Jesus, we have worked and toiled to go out and teach people Jesus' word so that they can be saved for eternity. That's our work. That's our work. Watch out that you do not lose what we have worked for. Watch out that you don't lose your salvation, is what he's saying, right? And then he says, but that you may be rewarded fully. What does he mean by that? Rewarded fully. Well, what he's getting at that is if you've come to a decision for Christ at some point, but then you listen to a deceiver, as he's titling them, and then you go over to their side and believe their thing and don't believe the way of Jesus anymore, you're not going to be fully rewarded. You're not going to get to spend eternity with Jesus forever. You're not going to get that full reward. You just had that little moment. Kind of crazy, right? Verse 9, anyone who runs ahead and does not continue in the teaching of Christ does not have God. So you almost get this image. He's almost setting up this image of like a true teacher like him is here and he's teaching. He's saying, don't run ahead of me. Don't get past. Don't go into uncharted territory and start making this stuff up. Like there's some secret out there that wasn't really revealed in Jesus that you have to figure out through this Gnosticism or some other teacher. Don't get ahead of yourself, right? Anyone who runs ahead and does not continue in the teaching of Christ does not have God. If you don't know Jesus, you don't have God. You do not have God. Whoever continues in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. Okay, I'm going to read the next two verses, but we're going to come back to it because I think it's the point of the passage here. Verse 10 and 11. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not take them into your house or welcome them. Anyone who welcomes them shares in their wicked work. Going to come back to that. Verse 12. I have much to say to you, but I do not want to use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to visit you and talk with you face to face so that our joy may be complete. Verse 13. The children of your sister. Well, remember, whole letter in verse 1 started like this. The elder to the lady. And we said that the lady is the church. It's a euphemism for the church. Maybe a specific church John was writing to. So who's the lady's sister? Well, it's probably the church John is in, right? So he's saying the children of your sister, so the people within my church, who is chosen by God, send their greetings to your church. And that's how he ends the whole letter. There you go. We read all the book of 2 John. But I want to come back to these two verses, okay? 10 and 11, because this is really, this very short book was written specifically for these two verses, I think, for a very practical command that John is making to these people. He says this, if anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, so if someone comes to you and they're not hanging on to the teaching of Jesus, they're making this other stuff up, right? If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not take them into your house or welcome them. Anyone who welcomes them shares in their wicked work. Now, this is such an interesting idea. John is actually writing an entire letter to a church to say, don't welcome a certain type of person into your church or your home. Now, the two are almost synonymous because many churches at this time were house churches that just met in people's homes. So he's saying, like, hey, don't welcome this person to your church. Don't welcome this person into your home. That is a deceiver. Wow. Okay, first, so when we read it, we're like, well, wait, I thought I was supposed to be hospitable to everyone, right? What do you mean? I thought I was supposed to love everyone. And that's the trouble, you see. Because earlier, he defined love. He said this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands. That is why John went out of his way at the beginning of the letter, in the first half of the letter, to say, here is love. Love is obeying God. Love is truth. It includes God's truth. You don't just make up a new definition of love. And so he's saying that in some instances, it isn't a problem of loving others to not welcome them into your home or into your church. Again, kind of makes us uncomfortable because we haven't got our minds around this sort of thing. How can we make sense of this? Okay. Think of three people, okay? Now, three people. The first one does not know Jesus, doesn't have faith in Jesus, okay? They might be close or far away, but they don't know God. We are told in no unequivocal form, no matter who they are, we welcome that person to our church, right? If it's a neighbor, welcome them into your home, love that person unreservedly, passionately, Help them find Jesus, okay? Second person is someone who does know Jesus, right? And sticks to the truth of the Lord, sticks to God's commands and obedience. And hey, none of us are perfect, but knows Jesus and knows the essentials of the faith and believes in it. Third, though, there's a third type of person, because the second type of person, just like the first, we welcome them to our home. We welcome them unreservedly into our churches. But the third type of person, that's the person we don't welcome. That person is a deceiver. That person says that they're a Christian, but they actually are trying to lead you astray into false teaching that is going to lead you so far away from Jesus that you will not be fully rewarded, as John is talking about in verse 8. That you'll actually move completely away from Jesus. Now that's kind of a crazy thought, right? Because we do think so much about being hospitable as Christians, but there is this type of person that we are told right here in Scripture. Where were we told? If anyone comes to you, does not bring this teaching, truth of Jesus, don't take them into your house. Do not welcome them. Anyone who welcomes them shares in their wicked work. We're actually told, do not welcome this third person into your church or into your home. Now, how do we know who the third person is? I mean, isn't this the difficult part, right? It wouldn't be horrible if we thought that there was something that, you don't know truth, and so we put you out, right? Hasn't a lot of this idea that, I can't have anything to do with you, split the church up 1,000,000 times into thousands and thousands of denominations, and aren't we against that? I know our church is. And okay, so how do you know how to differentiate? Here's how you know. You know the essentials of the faith. You see, the essentials of our faith differentiate the Christian who has just some different views on non-essentials and the one who is a deceiver. You have to know the absolute essentials. Now, if you're wondering what our church's essentials are, these are up on our website. We have a few very simple essentials, but then we also believe that the Creed of Nicaea, written in 325, lays out the absolute essentials of the faith. Now, in our church, we put it like this. We hold the essentials with a closed fist and non-essentials with an open hand. So people who, they have different views on maybe how the end times happened, or a certain ethic that isn't addressed in Scripture, or a different way to look at predestination, or this sort of, these non-essentials. This is not essential. It's not going to change whether you're saved or not, whether you know Jesus or not. They're non-essentials, okay? We hold those with an open hand. We can welcome those people. We do welcome people who have different views on the non-essentials than us. But then the absolute essentials, we don't give up on those. And we don't let people come into our church and teach that don't agree with those essentials. And we don't let people come into our home who don't agree with those essentials and teach our children something different. We just don't. How does that play into this passage? Well, one of the absolute essentials of our faith is who Jesus was. That Jesus was both God and man. He was 100% God, 100% divine spirit, existing for eternity and will exist forever, co-equal with the Father and the Spirit, 100% God. And 100% man. Really came in the flesh. Really was born of a woman. Really lived a life. Really experienced pain. Really experienced all these things we experience, right? It's an absolute essential. That is non-negotiable. It's non-negotiable. And so here, someone was coming to their church teaching against an absolute essential in their church, that Jesus came in the flesh. They were teaching that he was only divine Holy Spirit, not human, and not with real flesh and blood physicality to his being. And so John is saying, when you see that, when you see someone teaching against the absolute essentials of our faith, don't welcome them in your home. Don't welcome them in your church. He's not talking about non-believers, okay? That's something totally different. He's talking about the person who's saying, I'm a Christian, but doesn't actually believe in the essentials of faith. One of these today that gets questioned over and over again is Jesus the only way to the Father? If you can't just simply say yes to that, you're not agreeing with the absolute essentials of our faith. Another one of these is the content of how God saves us, right? That because of Jesus dying on the cross, we are forgiven. That the how he saves us isn't so that he can just inspire us to be better people and wealthy and successful and prosperous and healthy. And some of the biggest churches in our country are built on that very deception, right? So our learning here, John took the time, and this letter made it into Scripture for a reason, to say you've got to be able to look out for the deceivers. Now, it really makes me think of 2 Timothy 4, verse 3. It says this: "The time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they'll gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear." Happens a ton today too, right? We all have itching ears. We have things we want to believe about God that are not true. We have things we want to believe about faith that are not true. Our ears are itching to hear those things. But when you hear them, you got to hold on to the essentials. Don't let that go. Don't welcome teachers into your life, whether it's a message online or going to a church. Don't welcome teachers into your life, a podcast, a book, if they do not believe in the essentials of faith. Thanks for being here. God bless.